What if Google started a country? The nation of Goog. Google is not merely a mega corporation. It is far, far more. Google may be a truly unique enterprise, so rare in its properties and function and its construct that it may be the best company to start and sustain its own nation state. Google may already be considered the ultimate mega corporation, and yet it can be far, far more. It may be the ultimate corporatocracy. Thus, let us now further discuss what would happen if Google started a country. We break down our dialogue into two sections distinct in order to better engage in our discussion. Section 1, Why Google is Unique. Section 2, The Nation of Goog. Why and how. Section 1, Why Google is Unique. Google is unlike your typical corporation. There are other corporations that are larger and wealthier. However, Google may be in a class of its own. We attempt to explain why. Why Google is different. Reason 1. Preeminent merchant type. In the 4 kinds of jobs, we delineated 4 types of occupations and merchant classes. Google is a Type 4 entity, a global business, the most powerful of merchants. A global merchant is one that can operate in any locale and sell to any location. It is universal by decree. Thus, it is the most powerful type of firm. Let us juxtapose Google to an auto manufacturer such as Tesla so as to clearly explain the difference between 2 particular merchant classes. Tesla needs to be located in a certain geographical area in order to produce cars. Additionally, Tesla can only sell cars into a certain market, currently first world markets. Thus, even the powerful Tesla Corporation is more of a local global firm, if not a local firm. Tesla can neither make cars everywhere nor sell cars everywhere. Google, on the other hand, can produce the algorithm that runs Google from any location. It can sell its search engine to anyone, anywhere. Being a global entity gives it enormous power because it is equipped with optionality, potentially selling its services across borders while answering to no one, no authority but its own. Why Google is different. Reason number 2. The ultimate commodity. An economy consists of 4 parts: labor, land, capital, information. Of the 4 economic elements, some are more scalable than others. One can create more wealth with land than with labor. One can create more wealth with capital than with land. Information is the most scalable of all economic elements since information can be infinitely copied with little to no additional cost. Google is information. At the core of the company is a piece of code. Thus, the corporation is infinitely scalable, whereas the company that produces automobiles or computers is not. Why Google is different. Reason number 3. The network effect. Know that the software that underpins Google is powered by the network effect. The uniqueness of the code cannot be overstated. Information powered by the network effect is almost immune to the laws of economics, dare we say even the laws of nature. Know that everything in the universe can be copied so as to lower its value. The more copies one makes of something, the less valuable it does become due to scarcity or the lack thereof. As an example, the more hamburger restaurants, the less valuable your hamburger restaurant. However, one could copy the Google source code indefinitely and the company would still dominate because they operate on a network effect. Some estimate that there are 13 types of network effects. Google may perhaps be best categorized as a bandwagon network effect, meaning the more people that use the search engine, the bigger and better it becomes. The bigger and better it becomes, the more people want to use it. Google now has a 20-year head start on its competition and a user base of 1 billion. Thus, the positive feedback loop nearly eliminates all competition. We do not need 50 search engines, especially 49 that are inferior. Thus, in all likelihood, Google is here to stay, whereas the same cannot be said about a powerful phone manufacturer or even your favorite coffee house, since neither operate on a positive feedback loop network effect. Thus, Google is the ultimate monopoly, an information monopoly powered by the network effect. Therefore, the company reverting to the mean and becoming ordinary or average will be quite difficult. As an example, the United States of America has lost much of its prominence due to being copied. Today, many nations around the world are better at being America than the America of old, when it was only recently that no nation had any similarities to the United States. No one will be better at being Google than Google for quite some time, at least not through mimicry. Instead, those that wish to best the search giant will have to most likely reinvent search entirely. An ambitious proposition indeed. Thus, Google is the most exceptional of companies for the following reasons. It is a global merchant, the merchant with the most optionality. It is information, the most scalable and powerful part of the economic process. It is powered by the network effect, the ultimate business effect. It is a monopoly, the best type of business model. If one wishes to be prosperous and free, one should desire to have such qualities. Indeed, it is good to be Google. Why monopoly matters. Longevity and consistency is helpful when nation building. After all, one would not want to join a nation if collapse were on the horizon. Google can leverage its monopoly in one area to adequately fund its secondary endeavors. In our case, that secondary endeavor would be the governance of a nation. Usually, a country gains a competitive advantage over its neighbors via monopoly. This allows a nation to earn a very high ROI from one endeavor that they may then leverage to gain even more power. As an example, consider the massive ROI ancient Egypt must have attained by being located next to the Nile River, or the free money the United States acquired by having the petrodollar. Such riches gave each nation something for free, which then allowed them to dominate their neighbors. Cheap energy, or cheap calories, or cheap defense, or cheap money is surely a great way to ensure the survival of anything, whether that be a nation or a company or an individual. Being graced with a natural comparative advantage via a monopoly on scarcity can be used as leverage to conquer additional lands or embark upon further endeavors, which in return provide even more ROI. The process of conquest will continue ad infinitum until such a time when diseconomies of scale arise or the original monopoly is lost, whereupon collapse shall commence. In the case of Google, it is not the Nile River, but their incontestable monopoly on search, from which they derive cheap money, that would be the economic engine by which they power their civilization and assert their authority. Section 2. The Nation of Goog. The civilization function. What is civilization? Firstly, we begin with the premise that a nation or civilization can be best described as a function of productivity and reproductivity. After all, if a nation has no people but streets filled with buildings, it is still not a nation, rather an abandoned ghost town. After all, if a nation has no goods and services but hordes of humanity, it is hardly a nation, rather a refugee camp wherein humans dwell. Thus, a nation must have both a flourishing population and markets. The great nations attempt to maximize for both people and goods, for both reproductivity and productivity. See our work, What is Civilization, for more details. Can the nation of Goog maximize for both reproduction and production? Can it compel its citizenry to make the most widgets and babies? No. The country of Goog would not be like your classic nation. In all likelihood, it would not try to maximize for the growth of humans, i.e. reproductivity. The nation would refrain from implementing social policies or promoting religiosity or even morals and ethics, since the enforcement of such policies costs money and provides little to no ROI. Most nations spend a great amount of time and resources by creating laws or morals or enforcing religiosity so as to ensure their citizens maximize their reproductive capabilities. Reproductivity ensures the survival of the tribe and creates more humans for the nation's war engine and economic machine. The nation of Goog would not be like most nations. Goog would surely not care which citizens live or die or which citizens choose to multiply. It would abandon socialistic or theocratic or nationalistic ideals. Instead, Goog would most likely primarily focus on productivity, the economy, so as to ensure the greatest return on its original investment. The nation of Goog would have an external building model instead of an internal building model. A robust economy would attract people from around the globe in order to perpetuate its population expansion. Thus, Goog would care not even if a sizable portion of its citizenry became so utterly distracted by the pursuit of wealth that they stopped procreating, or that a lax, liberal society began to engage in destructive hedonistic behavior resulting in economically useless citizens. In the end, everyone would be replaceable. Such a method of focusing on a nation's production and foregoing reproduction is currently employed by the UK and USA, wherein the native populations no longer produce even replacement levels of children, forcing the country to subsidize its reproduction through immigration. Note, the shareholders of Google may outlaw certain social activities that reduce productivity and economic activity. Reasons for starting a nation. One should ask why Google would start its own country. The answer is simple: life, liberty, property. Realize this: there are severe restrictions placed on Google's ability to maximize its data collection and usage by government, whereas the government places little to no restrictions upon itself. In the name of national security, a government may harvest any and all information. Indeed, it is good to be the king. Why lose life and liberty and property by being a vassal within a nation when one can become a nation unto itself? Why surrender negative rights to a nation-state when creating a nation would allow you to keep all your rights while also providing the corporation with positive rights it could not otherwise attain? Surely having its own nation would be worth billions to Google. Goog, nation type. The nation of Goog would not be a democracy, since democracy ultimately leads to socialism, which would again lower the function it is attempting to maximize, the creation of wealth. The nation of Goog would be a publicly traded authoritarian regime wherein anyone and everyone could buy shares so as to control the bureaucracy. Its terms of service would act like a constitution. The government of Goog would in all likelihood not interfere with the personal or private matters of its constituents, since each dollar spent on such matters lowers the profit margin of the company. The authoritarian regime would be no ultra-libertarian haven either. It would potentially have to eliminate economic activities that may involuntarily kill off its citizens and thereby reduce its capacity to earn revenue, though such laws would most likely be few in number. The country of Goog would resemble your local government and not a national government, which typically attempts to be all things to all people in order to keep the peace. Goog, land acquisition. Google would launch its nation not through annexation but with the purchase of land. In 1803, the US engaged in the Louisiana Purchase with France for $15 million, acquiring 13 states worth of territories at less than 3 cents per acre. Google, similarly, could offer any third world nation a hefty sum for severely underutilized land. One would think that any one of the struggling African nations would be willing to sell a part of their country for a few $billion or for Alphabet stock. Goog, its headquarters. Land that once had little to no value would increase 100-fold upon being acquired by Google. Why? Google is massively wealthy. Google has more revenue than 70% of the nations on Earth. Google would move its nearly 100,000 employees to its new nation. The new nation would now have a revenue stream of over $100 billion. The nation of Goog would have one of the highest per capita incomes. The country would be rich beyond belief. One would imagine that for every one Google employee, the nation would need another 100 or 1,000 employees in other fields such as doctors and lawyers and teachers, etc., etc. Thus, the nation would quickly have millions of residents. The economy, or GDP, would grow overnight, perhaps reaching as high as 500 billion. The nation of Goog would become an economic powerhouse. And yet this is only the beginning. Google being able to relocate its headquarters at any time is a major reason as to why countries are afraid of taxing major corporations. Wanting to tax corporations more may be a popular slogan in leftist circles, but in reality, a mega corporation can simply pack up and move at any time, making the destination nation quite wealthy in the process. Without deviating too far from our primary discussion, it must be stated that if Facebook, Apple, Amazon, and Google decided to go to Mexico, it would radically alter the Mexican economy for the better. Its GDP would grow dramatically overnight. Yes, income inequality would rapidly rise in Mexico due to the influx of millionaires, but so too would poverty drastically fall upon the arrival of each mega corporation. Goog, a tax haven. Surely a nation cannot exist without taxation to maintain the bureaucracy and key elements of governing. The nation of Goog would charge all its citizens a yearly fee to dwell on its property, $100 or $1,000 or perhaps as high as $10,000 a year. Multiply this by 100,000 or 1 million or 10 million citizens and you have a vast sum of money enabling the nation to both pay for the bureaucracy and provide the company with additional revenue, which would then increase its share value. However, Goog would have another means by which to attain revenue so as to serve both the common good and provide further ROI for its shareholders. Unlike other governments, the country of Goog may be able to function with zero income taxation, making it all the more attractive to immigrants from across the globe. All governments require a monopoly to survive. Recently, more and more nations have acquired a monopoly on the printing of currency as a means to extort wealth from the population via inflation so as to maintain superiority and authority. The country of Goog may demand the simplest of monopoly. In lieu of demanding a monopoly on money printing, they could simply demand a monopoly on information. Perhaps written into the constitution of Goog would be a decree stating that only Google gets to provide the nation with high-speed internet. Thus, they could then collect your data freely. Remember, Google is fueled by data. It is their currency. It is the source of their power and superiority and authority. Monopolizing information collection on 1 million or 10 million or 100 million citizens would make Google quite wealthy. Furthermore, the information monopoly would only make their algorithm stronger, ensuring they remain ahead of their competitors. It would not be taxes, but monopolies on its business ventures that would fund the nation of Goog. Google could run experiments on a grand scale. It could gather any type of data it wanted on its citizenry so as to make its algorithm better. It could introduce driverless cars to the road before anyone. It could introduce robots to the general public without going through bureaucratic hurdles. The country of Goog, the richest country in the world. Know that a country built on a function in which it attempts to maximize the wealth of its citizens would be very unique, to say the least. The country you currently occupy is not built to optimize your wealth. On the contrary, it has all manner of optimization functions that go against your best interest, especially your economic ones. Such is the way of typical nations. The nation of Goog would be no ordinary country. We present the following example to illustrate our optimization argument. Imagine if a tobacco company tried to start its own country and required a tobacco monopoly in lieu of taxation. How does a tobacco company earn revenue? By selling more tobacco. The country of Marlboro may want smoking everywhere. They would wish people smoked instead of purchasing cars or wedding rings. They would certainly want children smoking. And yet we clearly know that there are major health implications with tobacco usage, including accelerated death. Thus, the optimization functions are not aligned properly. The country of Marlboro would kill off its citizenry in pursuit of profits. Another example. Imagine if the Tesla Corporation tried to start the country of Tesla. They too would have a conflict of interest if they were to require a car sales monopoly in lieu of taxation. Tesla would now provide its nation of customers with the worst product at the highest prices so as to maximize taxation and profit. Thus, it would hurt its nation's economic efficiency. Goog would not make money from stealing from its citizens like most countries. An ROI would only be attained by aiding its citizenry. Therefore, Goog would do everything in its power to ensure that the internet functioned at optimal levels. Instead of giving you the worst product at the highest price, it would give you the best product possible at the lowest price possible, since every new internet user generates data which then generates revenue for Google via its search algorithm. Cheap, abundant, and high-quality internet would act as a loss leader. Google would want everyone and everything internet-based. They would care not what product you bought, hoping that you clicked on one of its adverts prior to purchase. Thus, unlike other companies, you are not its customer. You are its customer's customer. Unlike most companies, and certainly most governments, Google does not have a conflict of interest when pertaining to the economy. Google wants commerce. Google earns its revenue from advertising. You would in all likelihood be given economic liberties prohibited by other nations, since the country of Goog would want you to be extremely wealthy. The wealthier the citizenry, the more commerce. The more commerce, the more advertising. The more advertising, the wealthier Google becomes. This subtle designation regarding you not being the prey of the nation makes all the difference between a country that would end up in shambles once given a monopoly versus a country that could potentially become the richest on earth. Goog would become the ultimate country of commerce. The most unique of nations would be born from this most unique of companies. Keeping the bureaucracy small. All nations and governments have a tendency to grow, so saith life. A totalitarian regime always wants more power so as to fuel its corruption. A democratic government wants constant expansion so as to bribe its voters. The nation of Goog needs not your vote, being that it is an authoritarian regime. The nation of Goog does not require bureaucratic expansion since there are no corrupt mouths to feed. Rather, Goog would want a minimalistic government in order to keep taxation low so as to attract more citizens and increase profits. It may want the smallest government possible with the least amount of workers. Again, this has to do with the optimization function. Since Google earns its revenue from advertising, it may want as much of the economy in private hands so that the citizenry may use that wealth to acquire goods and services, which would then require more advertisements. Additionally, an employee of the state has limited economic productivity, and the country of Goog may wish all residents were highly productive to fulfill its optimization function that maximizes the economy. A second means by which the nation of Goog would keep its bureaucracy small would be AI, robots, and automation. Realize this: Google is an AI company first and foremost, on the leading edge of artificial intelligence. They know well the value of replacing a workforce with robots and algorithms. The nation of Goog would be highly capable of replacing all its bureaucratic employees via automation so as to keep the cost of government low, whereas it would not be politically feasible for your current government to do likewise. In your current government, there reside countless employees who happen to vote, or they may perhaps be given a job due to nepotism. Eliminating the job of a potential voter or family member can prove to be disastrous for a politician. Thus, the bureaucracy grows ever larger and more inefficient. The country of Goog. War machine. A country does not have to offer its citizenry much of anything so as to function properly. Economic liberty, a sound justice system, and most of all, security from external invasion is all one truly needs to survive and thrive. Will the days of military warfare soon be over? There is reason to believe that as we move forward in time, it may become more and more difficult for man to capture additional land by way of brute force. We may indeed see the end of land wars in the not-so-distant future, not only through the mutually assured destruction of atomic weaponry, but through achieving a technological stalemate. Man may be on the verge of creating and using robotic armies that cannot be so easily defeated. Thus, the ability to conquer new territories via traditional warfare may be all but thwarted. We may already be in the age of informational warfare or cyber warfare, where nations can rise and fall via the proliferation of information, not through the sword. Code, the ultimate killer, the ultimate weaponry. Who is better prepared to build the robotic army of the future other than the company that in all likelihood will possess the best AI in the world? Google may have in its possession the type of intelligence to provide the best security in the 21st century. Would not the country of Goog be better at handling the info war than any other country? Would they not have the engineers and the engineering prowess to protect their citizens from all manner of computational attacks? Goog, its inhabitants. Who would potentially move to the nation of Goog? There are hundreds and thousands of people who refer to themselves as Googlers. Is it so inconceivable to believe that many individuals would move to the country of Goog, especially knowing they had a chance to increase their wealth and economic freedoms, or that they could live in a country where there were little to no social stigmas, where all were free to do as they please so long as the ad revenue flows? The corporatocracy. We have lived through theocracies and monarchies and democracies. Are we ready to live in an age of the corporatocracy? Private cities were prevalent in our past. They were referred to as company towns. Now they barely exist. And yet there are various reasons as to why there may be no better time than now for corporations to begin creating nation-states. We are living in the age of economic law, a time wherein the laws of economics supersede previous alpha laws such as familial law, divine law, constitutional law, etc., etc. The rise of economic law ensures that people obey the rules of the economy over any other rule, since the economy is of the highest value, the greatest good, the law of all laws by which man does live. The economy is our authority, the law man does pledge his allegiance to. The economy is all that matters, to many if not most, especially in an atomized, materialistic world devoid of spirituality and religiosity. Thus, the corporation has become more powerful than nearly any entity on Earth, more powerful than the family or church, and soon more powerful than any democracy or republic. For a better understanding of how laws affect man through the ages, see our works, An Introduction to Alpha Laws and An Introduction to Machine Law. Nations of the Future. There are those that believe that the 21st century will see a vast rise in the number of new countries. We agree. Humanity may crowdfund new nations or use AI to form new tribes, or perhaps corporations will indeed begin to start new countries as a way to increase profits. We once lived in a world where the best land meant you were the best nation. Then, the amount of cheap labor, serfs, and slaves determined your nation's prowess. Capitalism then determined the ruling nation-state. Now the world turns to information. We are in the age of information. Power comes not from land or labor or capital, but from a monopoly on information. Those with the greatest understanding and monopoly on information have the best chance of governance in the 21st century and beyond. No one understands information better than Google. The country of Goog could one day be the prototype of what the nation exemplar should be.